I'd read a news blurb from a Christian website, and actually a Christian worldview website, that reads as follows. U.S. military report blames Bible-believing Christians for lack of world peace, understanding, and dialogue. And this particular site and this particular Christian author generally throws out these very bombastic and somewhat out of context statements because I've described this as red meat journalism. It gets the troops all revved up. And of course everybody does that to a certain degree, but you have to deliver on what you are claiming here. And this particular Christian worldview advocate, which is, his worldview is very schizophrenic. While he wants to change the culture, at the same time, the majority of his speakers teach that we're living in the end times and we're right on the brink of the rapture, and this is the final generation. And it's hard to reconcile developing a Christian worldview with the idea that the end is right around the corner. But the report that he's referring to is one written by Major Brian L. Stuckert, who's with the U.S. Army. It's a monograph, and I don't know if it was part of continuing education, if it was part of a master's degree program that he had done. It's approximately 60 or so pages. There's an extensive bibliography. It's very, very well written, footnoted throughout, and there's really nothing new in it. The name of it is Strategic Implications of American Millennialism. And it was for the School of Advanced Military Studies, United States Army Command and General Staff College, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. And it was published in 2008. And it hasn't gotten a lot of publicity, obviously, because there's really nothing that striking in it. The content of this particular monograph isn't much different from what has been written for years. In fact, if I went back through my library a little bit, and there's a book here by Paul Boyer, When Time Shall Be No More, Prophecy, Belief in a Modern American Culture. This is a very, very helpful book, not written by a Christian, but who surveys the impact of eschatological beliefs over a fairly long period of time, and brings it up to the time that this was written, I believe in I don't know if it was in the 90s, and yeah, 1992, brings it up to that date. Very well written, published by Harvard Press. You can probably still get it online in paperback, When Time Shall Be No More. I have found this to be very, very helpful. And then recently, a book came out by Kevin Phillips called American Theocracy, The Peril and Politics of Radical Religion, Oil, and Borrowed Money in the 21st Century. This is a fairly uneven book, but on the eschatological issues, he gets most things right. And then probably the most recent one is by Frank Schaeffer, called Patience with God, and I've had a review of this a little bit. And it's Faith for People Who Don't Like Religion or Atheism, Patience with God. And there's a chapter in here with the title, Spaceship Jesus Will Come Back and Whisk Us Away. And this is probably, there are a number of things that I agree with in this book. I've been very critical of this book and very critical of Frankie Schaeffer, only because I think his solutions to his problems with evangelicalism and fundamentalism aren't really that great. And in siding with the people at the Huffington Post and liberals isn't going to win him any points with them or with his fundamentalist community. But on this particular chapter, I tend to agree with him on this particular statement. He says, convincing folks that Armageddon is on the way and all we can do is wait, pray, and protect our families from the chaos that will be the prelude to the return of Christ is perhaps not the best recipe for political, economic, or personal stability, let alone social cohesion. Now, so this report, The Strategic Implications of American Millennialism, you can find it online. The book by Paul Boyer, When Time Shall Be No More, American Theocracy by Kevin Phillips, and Frankie Schaeffer's chapter in his book, Patience with God, again, these aren't new critiques of modern day, essentially dispensational premillennialism. And in fact, the critiques made in all of these, American Vision has been making for 30 years. This is why I wrote my book, Last Days Madness, that not only is the eschatological interpretive system of dispensational premillennialism unfounded and it cannot be supported by a clear study of the Bible, but its implications socially, culturally, and politically, I believe, are dangerous. And I've said that over and over and over again. I get emails from people telling me to stop criticizing dispensationalism or criticizing dispensationalists. I really don't criticize dispensationalists. I criticize the system that they teach. I believe the system is wrong. I don't believe it's biblical. I've challenged people to come on this show to defend their system. Got an email from a fellow the other day criticizing me for criticizing dispensationalism and says, can't we all just get along? Let's put aside the eschatology and let's just deal with worldview issues. The problem is, as the author of this study maintains, there's linkage. There's a web of belief that's going on here. Eschatology affects the way people believe and act culturally and politically. You can't divorce them. And the critic of this report that I read, U.S. military report, blames Bible-believing Christians for lack of world peace, understanding, and dialogue. He even understands that there's a relationship between eschatology and culture. And so to point that out to people it isn't on the face of it simply a critique of religious people who believe things about the Bible, which this Christian critic seems to indicate here. It's simply saying that this particular belief system has cultural, political, and foreign policy implications. There's nothing new in any of that. And as I pointed out, if you read this particular report, which I've just gotten, I just started reading last night, I point this out in a book that I wrote earlier this year called Why the End of the World is Not in Your Future, Identifying the Gog-Magog Alliance. And the introduction to that could have come directly from this particular report. So it's now let me tell you the difference between this. The person who wrote against this particular report, and the U.S. military report blames Bible-believing Christians for lack of world peace and understanding and dialogue. I sent that author a PDF of my book, Why the World is Not in Your Future, which essentially says the same thing that this military officer writes in his monograph. The same thing. In the first chapter, in fact, I quote the same people that he quotes. And so I haven't said anything that hasn't been said. But because I offer a biblical analysis of the dispensational premillennial view, a biblical analysis that cannot withstand scrutiny, he will not deal with my analysis of the same topic. And the reason is because my analysis is a biblical analysis. And the whole fabric of dispensational premillennialism and its end-time preoccupation with war and conquest and the inevitability of war and conquest just upsets the whole apple cart. My exegesis of the passages that they use in order to defend their system, those arguments cannot be made. They cannot be supported by their claims of interpreting the Bible literally. And so they rev up their audiences with the military is now attacking Christians who believe this system, and the military shouldn't pay for these things. And that may be the case. But at the same time, they cannot deal with the arguments that I've presented and why the end of the world is not in your future. They don't want to bring it to the attention of their people because they cannot answer those arguments biblically, and that is the issue of the day.